Welcome to Trinidad and Tobago Opposition's media briefing. It's Sunday, the 21st of April, 2024. Major issues within the health and energy sector. Today we have presenting MP Dr. David Lee, the Shadow for Energy, and former Minister Dr. Tim Gopeesingh. Thank you for attending our virtual press conference. Please share the links and we will begin shortly.
Everybody now, let's go. Come on, come on. Hey. Whoa, oh, whoa, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Whoa, oh, yeah. It's time to make a difference. It's time to turn that page. We got to do the right things if we want brighter days. Cause things ain't getting easy and the road ahead is tough. It's up to you and I to make the madness stop. Every day the things getting harder, and every day the things getting rough, and every day they hike the food prices and they implementing more tax. For the sake of our twin nation and the youth of the next generation, let's stand united, show we're not divided. Let's show them now and send them a message.
Good morning, and I would like to welcome the viewers, listeners to our Sunday opposition press conference. I also like to welcome the media who is present here this morning. Today is 21st of April 2024, and I am joined by my esteemed former Minister of Education, one of the best performing ministers of education between 2010 to 2015, Dr. Tim Gopeesingh. He's a well-renowned medical doctor in the gynecology field, and we call him, not only I, but we call him the legend in our party because we respect and we love Dr. Tim so much. So after I present this morning, I will ask Dr. Tim to join and give his presentation, which will be on the what is happening in the Pointe-a-Pierre General Hospital with the deaths of these babies. I think the number is up to about 14 now, if my memory is correct. And also he will be giving us some information on Ministry of Education. So let me start off by saying thank you for joining me here this morning. What we have seen in the past 10 days in our country, and I want to go back to last week, Thursday thereabouts, Thursday the 11th of April, where on Friday we saw on the headlines in the newspapers, headline says 7 babies dies at Pointe-a-Pierre General Hospital. And I am sure this morning, I know Dr. Tim Gopeesingh will elaborate a bit more on the deaths of these babies and what is happening based on his experience at that neonatal unit in the Pointe-a-Pierre General Hospital. Today in the Sunday's Guardian, continuing with what is happening in our health sector, we see on page 7, 951 neonatal deaths in Trinidad and Tobago between 2018 to 2022. And again, Dr. Tim will come and talk and elaborate and give a discourse on that aspect of what is happening, especially in our neonatal units throughout the health sector in Trinidad and Tobago. On Saturday the 13th April, on Friday, let me start back on Friday the 12th of 2024 in Parliament. What was laid by the government was the EBC, the Election and Boundaries Commission report, was laid in Parliament, where the renaming of 5 constituencies were done by the EBC. And one of the 5 constituencies, one of the 5 affected myself as a member of Parliament, Pointe-a-Pierre, where for years, ever since everyone knows it as Pointe-a-Pierre, as the constituency of Pointe-a-Pierre, and in that EBC report, one of the 5 name changes for boundaries was Pointe-a-Pierre, where the EBC has now recommended to change to Claxton Bay. And I have given throughout the week, I have been interviewed by the media about this name change, and again in the media today, one of the dailies, it says, Pointe-a-Pierre MP, why not rename it? If you want to keep it to Claxton Bay and want to rename it from Pointe-a-Pierre, why not have Claxton Bay / Marabella as the new name change, in keeping with the other 4 name changes that was done in the other areas of Trinidad and Tobago. So that is something that happened in the last 7 days. On Sunday the 14th, last Sunday, 7 of the families of the 7 babies who died over the past few days has given notice that they will be suing the state. And that happened on Sunday the 14th. On Monday the 15th, at our UNC Monday night meeting, Dr. Munilal raised the issue about the Prime Minister's Rowley $10 million international travel bill and the different countries that he would have visited. Now that raised a hue and a cry, because at one stage Dr. Rowley said he was not responding to Dr. Munilal. And then on Thursday, we saw a press conference being held by Dr. Rowley, Prime Minister, and he spent most of his time addressing his foreign travel and the cost that he incurred on those foreign travels on Thursday. And that was held on Thursday by a press conference. And coming out of that press conference, there are several markers that came out of that press conference, which I'll get into. But it's interesting, and after he defended his $10 million travel bill, he said, come early May, he'll be traveling again to Ghana and then to India on another foreign trip after defended that $10 million travel bill. On Wednesday, it is interesting, on Wednesday last week, what came out of the US government was where they issued OFAC, Office of Foreign Assets Control Department, where they talked about they will be winding down and imposing further imposing sanctions on the Venezuelan government in the oil and gas sector. And I'll get more into that. On Thursday last week, at the Joint Select Committee, on Wednesday the Joint Select Committee was held. And coming out of that Joint Select Committee, in the Public Accounts Committee, where the chairman was our Senator Wade Mark, it was interesting that the chairman, Newman George, on behalf of that Garcara Refinery company and the Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Company, Chairman George mentioned, and it came out in the media, that the preservation of mothballing the Pointe-a-Pierre refinery has costed this government and you, the taxpayers, of over $500,000 per month. And I will elaborate on that figure of $500,000 per month that Chairman Newman George had mentioned was being the cost incurred to preserve and mothball the Pointe-a-Pierre refinery. Also, in the media last week is something that I think most of us would have missed, that the Auditor General, when she laid her report in Parliament, it talked about a $1.2 billion being paid late to the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. That was an article in one of the dailies, I think a lot of the media might have missed that, but it talked about the late payment of injecting funds into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund based on the formula of oil revenues in our country. And that is something that we will come to at another date. But I just want to stick a pin on that to mark that this morning. So Trinidad and Tobago, 14 days ago, I was right here at a press conference on a Sunday. And we presented the facts on the vulnerability, the catastrophe, and the broken state of affairs that has plagued our energy sector. On April 7th, we demonstrated to you how every single metric from gas production, oil production, drilling, energy sector employment, and energy sector growth was at an all-time low under this government. 14 days later, we are here again as great danger is on the horizon for this country's energy sector. 14 days later, we are forced to come to you again, not for politicking, but for your own national interest to highlight yet another crisis knocking on the door of our energy sector. Trinidad and Tobago, that is how brittle, how fragile, and disintegrated your energy sector has become under this present government. That is the space of 14 days, more danger is on the horizon. In the space of 2 weeks, the dragon gas, which this government has pinned its country's economic hopes on, have come into question. In the last 2 weeks, we have learned that the refinery, which belongs to you and was promised to the OWTU, is being considered by 8 entities. In the last 2 weeks, the U.S. Energy Information Administration, EIA, expects natural gas prices to remain 65% lower than 2022 and 10% lower than 2023. All of these issues require accountability because they have a direct impact on you, the lives of the citizens. Who is telling the truth in this dragon gas deal? And we have heard the Prime Minister and Minister Young last week, like one hand didn't know what the left hand didn't know the right hand. And this morning we're going to ask some questions. So this morning, on behalf of the taxpayers, we want to know who is really telling the truth on the status and impacts of this dragon gas deal to the recent reinstatement of U.S. sanctions on the Venezuelan oil and gas industry. Should we believe the Prime Minister or should we believe the Minister of Energy? Because in the last week, they have publicly given 2 clearly different positions. As this country called for clarity on the way forward, with this announcement, the Ministry of Energy has reported on Newsday, on Thursday, that the OFAC statement, no threat to the dragon gas deal. So let me just highlight what I mean. On Thursday, Minister Young was in the newspapers saying sanctions on Venezuela will not affect Trinidad and Tobago. That was a statement put out by the Ministry of Energy and also confirmed by the Minister of Energy, Minister Young, in his statement also. All right, so that when that statement of the OFAC, the license came out on Wednesday, the Ministry of Energy and Minister Young ran out and said these sanctions will not affect Venezuela. But what we saw, and there's another article that says no impact on dragon gas. All right, and then what we saw coming out from the Prime Minister's press conference was a contradiction in our view of what Minister Young said. All right, so I think there's a slide on the video on the screen that shows the contradiction that has taken place. All right, so again, Minister Young says it has no impact, and Prime Minister says the geopolitical issues could have some implications on the entire dragon gas deal. So when the Prime Minister spoke on Thursday, we were told an entirely different position. the Prime Minister told us, and I want to quote, "We are not immune to what goes on between Venezuela and the United States, because as we say that, two is a moving target." This is his quote. "What we have done is to try and build relationships and promote our interests in a wider sphere than in Port-au-Spain, so that whatever happens or whatever is happening or is to happen with Washington and Caracas, we have resolutely kept our interests in front of all parties." So on Wednesday, I repeat, the Minister of Energy tells us in essence not to worry, because as they state, the Minister of Energy advises that they work to explore and produce and export natural gas from this field to Trinidad and Tobago, meaning the Dragon gas field, is continuing. Those are his words, is continuing. But on Thursday, the Prime Minister tells us we are not immune to geopolitical interference. That is why on Friday in the opposition, and Friday in Parliament, the opposition went to Parliament to get a status update. I went to Parliament to ask certain questions on this Dragon gas deal because the stories were not adding up. Trinidad and Tobago, the answers we got would shock you. For the past year, they have been talking about the Dragon gas coming. On Friday, we called on the Prime Minister's question time to tell us what infrastructural work has been done to extract this gas from the Dragon gas field. Because you remember, Minister Young has always been boasting about a 2-year license that was triggered back in October 2023. We are in April 2024, and that license expires next year, 2025 October. Do you know that no physical or infrastructural work has been done on the Dragon field as yet? Listen to yourself as I ask my colleague to play the question that I asked on Friday in Parliament.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Second question to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister specifically state what infrastructural development has been done to date to explore and produce natural gas from the Dragon field?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, since obtaining the 30-year exploration and production license for the exploration and production of natural gas from Venezuela to Trinidad and Tobago on the 21st of December 2023, the National Gas Company and Shell have been working on the elements necessary to get the project done. These operations usually have long lead time and gestation periods. For example, the procurement of survey vessels to survey the field, the planning of well work, engineering designs, costings and other necessary work for the project have been going on, and all the necessary activities are underway as precursors to any physical activity which may take place on the field.
Member Pointe-a-Pierre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a follow-up question, Prime Minister, given that Shell is asking for an extension of the OFAC license, which you had mentioned, before it makes a final investment decision to begin infrastructure development of the Dragon field, could the Prime Minister state if he is confident that the U.S. government will extend the OFAC license to allow Shell to invest in this project?
Honourable Member, having regard to the original question asked, the answer given, and the standing orders, this question is out of order.
Thank you, and I'm back. You would have listened to the question I posed, the response from the Prime Minister. I had asked a supplemental question about the foreign investment part. It was denied in Parliament. So now Trinidad and Tobago, we understand field appraisal and field development takes time in the life cycle of a gas field. But the Dragon field is no ordinary project. It is a project where the investors want some certainty before they go forward. It is a project where Shell's investor, company Shell, wants some certainty before they go forward. 2 weeks ago, even before the United States reimposed sanctions on Venezuela, Shell, according to a Reuters report, was seeking a long-term license from the United States before making a final investment decision on the Dragon natural gas project in Venezuela. Shell was literally asking for a 15-year license before they made that investment. What that means is before Shell's investors approve the hundreds of millions of United States dollars, US dollars, needed to actually begin work to produce gas, they want a longer license beyond the 2 years, that was granted to Trinidad and Tobago. We raised this with you on April 7th, 2 weeks ago. We raised that, and we raised on April 7th. We called on the Minister of Energy to give some clarity and certainty that the Dragon deal was on strong footing with what was called an ask of Shell for a 15-year license. On April 7th, 2 weeks ago, we highlighted how Minister Young had suddenly changed his tune from boasting about the stability of this 2-year license to now responding to Shell's position, and I quote, by saying, this is Minister Young's quote, obviously, a 2-year license has a window, meaning it's very short and tight, and this is a transaction that will take more than 2 years. So even Minister Young is admitting that the 2-year license that Trinidad and Tobago got, that they have presently, is not enough time to conclude, or even, I would say, even start to find gas in that Dragon deal. Why did we raise this then? We wanted to show the population and the country that behind all the Dragon gas coming, boast of this government, there were significant hurdles to cross. 2 weeks later, we have entered even rockier territory because these U.S. sanctions will not instill confidence in Shell investors and their shareholders. Shell, the company, because of the millions needed for this project, will not wait until next October 2025 to see if the license is renewed to complete its final investment decision. At this very time, they will be considering if Dragon is worth the risk of making that capital expenditure at this point in time. Shell is under pressure globally with its investment portfolio. They will not do like this government did on Train 1, Atlantic Train 1, wasting millions of taxpayers' dollars. They'll be looking at these sanctions now that was reimposed. So the question is, can Dragon survive this latest uncertainty? Further, I asked this government, based on, and I want to go to something now. Now, before I move off from Shell, I got some information last night from a colleague, and they are saying that Shell is even looking to move operations to the United States, and that would have implications for us and this Dragon gas deal if that happens. I want to turn to something called, I want to ask the government, this official gazette. And this gazette here is from Venezuela, and it was exposed by the Venezuelan government last year. And, you know, one would have thought that Venezuela, you know, we call it a very undemocratic country, but they had to lay this gazette because of the deal, the gas deal that was happening between Venezuela, NGC, and Shell. So it was laid, and this came out in the media last year. So it is nothing new, but there's a clause on Article 66 that I want to read into the public. Now, we have heard both the Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, and Minister Young talked about beyond the 2-year license. They talked about, they keep mentioning a 30-year license that we have with the Venezuelan government in this Dragon field. Now, Article 66 in this gazette, I don't think many of us really understood or paid attention to Article 66, because Prime Minister Rowley and Minister Young keeps boasting about we have a 30-year license with the government of Maduro and the Venezuelan people. This government has been using the excuse that we have a 30-year license to monetize the Dragon field. They want you to believe that even if sanction prevents us from accessing the field for a few years, we still have many more years out of the 30 years remaining. But Article 66 of the license granted by Venezuela was gazetted on January 29, 2024. And I want to state what Article 66 says. Article 66 says, in the event of a non-compliance with any of the obligations, in fact, results from the imposition of sanctions and economic blocks stipulated, the ministry will grant an exceptional and single period of 6 months, at the end of which this license is terminated. So what this Article 66 says, in the event of non-compliance with any of the licensee's obligations, in fact results from the imposition of the sanctions and economic blocks stipulated in Article 64 of these general conditions, the ministry will grant an exceptional and single period of 6 months, at the end of which this license will be considered terminated. Now, that's a powerful statement in this gazette. It really, what it says in a nutshell is that if there are issues that develop in the 30 years that the Trinidad and Tobago government cannot, because of sanctions imposed, cannot go ahead with the deal of Dragon gas, they will give this country 6 months, and then they will consider terminating the 30-year license. It is there in this gazette that was gazetted on January 29, 2024, the official gazette of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. So it is there, and I ask the media to look at it. Is this saying that in the event of the OFAC license is not renewed, as I said, then 6 months later, the entire exploration license from Venezuela will be terminated? Is it that the 30-year license to monetize the Dragon field does not take into consideration or permit non-compliance due to sanctions beyond the period of 6 months? We call on the Minister of Energy and the Prime Minister to give us some clarity, not only to the population but to Shell, and I'm sure Shell is aware of Article 66. Now, that is as much I will say about the Dragon at this point in time. I have a lot more, but I have something pressing I want to turn to. And I want to ask the question. On Wednesday, at the Joint Select Public Accounts Committee, we had Chairman Newman George admitting, when he was asked how much does it cost to preserve or mothball the refinery, Newman George said $500,000 per month. And then he was also asked another question by one of the committee members. Are you talking in TT dollars or US dollars, that $500,000? And I think Newman George said it is 500,000 TT dollars. So he was saying that it is TT dollars. We have some conflicting information that I received this morning. And I want to go back to the refinery. When the refinery was closed in November 2018, in 2019, the offers went out, and OWTU, using their company called Patriotic Energies and Technology Limited, bid for the refinery. And when they did a bid, and I just want to give the history of that. So OWTU, through their company called Patriotic Technologies Limited, had offered a bid to purchase the refinery. And I want to quote what Prime Minister Rowley said when OWTU had put in their bid. Never forget the words, and I want to quote. We could visualize the OWTU leadership moving from pounding pavements and shouting across the street to being in a boardroom and taking serious decisions about serious investments that could make their members seriously rich. These are the words of Prime Minister Rowley back in 2019, when around that time was the local government elections. And he was on the hustings, Prime Minister Rowley was, and he made that quote. So he made a quote where he said that how OWTU leadership could move from pounding the streets to being in the boardroom and taking serious decisions and about serious investments that could make their members seriously rich. I would never forget the words of the Minister of Finance in September 9, 2019, during the budget time, when they announced the results of the bid, that Patriotic was the only bidder that offered an upfront consideration of $700 million US. Patriotic and OWTU, we believe, deserved the refinery back then. Good. But this government lied and prevented them from obtaining the refinery. Today, we will present the facts to demonstrate this. I have some Freedom of Information file. We filed, I got it today. There was a Freedom of Information on the 12th of August, and this relates to the why OWTU and Patriotic Technology did not get that refinery from this government. So on August the 12th, 2022, August the 12th, 2022, just August the 12th, a certain individual filed a Freedom of Information. And this, on the 2nd of September 2022, they got a response from the Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited. And it states, we acknowledge receipt of your Freedom of Information request form, both dated the 12th of August 2022, by Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited on even date. In this regard, please find attached our response to your request for your kind attention. And the request was, 1, document listing the names of persons that evaluated the bids for the sale or lease of the Guayakara refinery asset in the last request for proposal exercise. And the answer was, in August 2019, the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago appointed a 10-member committee to evaluate the bids for the sale or lease of the assets of the Guayakara Refinery Company Limited and Paria Fuel Traded Company Limited. The names of the members of this evaluation committee have been published and are as follows. Chairman, Vishnu Danpal, Anthony Chantak, Claire Gomez Miller, Joseph Remy, Ian Welsh, Selwyn Lashley, Dale McLeod, Sandra Fraser, Sahid Hussain, and Terence Barrett. Second question. The final report produced by the technical team that evaluated the preferred bidder, Patriotic Energies, and the responses. Any report produced in respect of the evaluation of the preferred bidder would have been prepared by the government-appointed evaluation committee, which I mentioned in names, and would be in the possession of the Ministry of Finance. In this regard, it would be appropriate for your request for the final report produced by the Technical Evaluation Committee to be directed to the Ministry of Finance. So what this first Freedom of Information Act information came out was that they listed the government's evaluation committee, and it also said that that report that they did would have been sent to the Ministry of Finance. Now, the individual filed another Freedom of Information dated the 17th of July, 2023. And they got a response on the, we did another Freedom of Information on June 22nd, 2023, we got a response. And I read, reference is made to the subject at caption and your application for access to official documents made pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act, Chapter 2202, dated the 15th of May 2023, and received by the Ministry of Finance on the same date. In response to the Freedom of Information application, the following information is provided. 1. The final report produced by the technical team, led by Chairman Vishnu Danpal, that evaluated the preferred bidder, Patriotic Energies, for the Guaracara refining asset in 2019. Response. That was the question we proposed. Response from the Ministry of Finance. Response. The Ministry of Finance is not in possession of the requested document. Further, no such document exists. I want to repeat that. Further, no such document exists. Therefore, the Ministry of Finance cannot grant access to the requested document. So, there is a conflict. When we filed the Freedom of Information back in August 2022, we were told that that report done by the Government Evaluation Committee, led by Vishnu Danpal as chairman, was sent to the Ministry of Finance, that final report. When we asked the Ministry of Finance, let us get a copy of what happened, that report, they are saying the Ministry of Finance is not in possession of the requested document. Further, this is critical, no such document exists. So am I to ask that the evaluation committee, headed by Vishnu Danpal, did not evaluate the preferred bidder, Patriotic Energies? Because in their letter they said they did, and they sent that final report to the Ministry of Finance. When we file a Freedom of Information to the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Finance is saying that no such report exists, and that there lies the dilemma. Why OWTU, when this government, led by Prime Minister Rowley, was given the impression to this country and Patriotic Technologies, OWTU, that they had won the bid on the refinery, and they had put together a proposal of upfront cash of over $700 million US they were prepared to put up and purchase in the refinery. That did not happen. And where is this report that we are asking about? Where is this final report that we are asking about? So we have a lot of unknowns, and that is why we have always said, the opposition leader has always said, when we return to government, we will call for a commission of inquiry in that whole shutdown of this petroleum refinery, because something is not smelling correct. It's not smelling right. I want to just turn a little bit before I end to the statement made by Newman George, the chairman at that Joint Select Committee. He said, his response to when he was asked by the vice chairman a question, how much does it cost to preserve or mothball the refinery? Chairman Newman George said approximately $500,000 TT. All right? I have another Freedom of Information. We love freedom of information. Filed on the 6th of October 2023. And the question or the information we wanted to get, and the question asked was, 1, we got the response on the 6th of October 2023. We filed that request on the 17th of July 2023. And the response we got was, 1, name of a contractor who was awarded the contract to carry out the preservation exercise of the Pointe-a-Pierre refinery asset since shutdown of the refinery on November 30th, 2018. 2, second question, cost of the preservation exercise on the refinery asset from December 1st, 2018 to 30th of June, 2023. With respect to item 1, which was the name of the contractor who had, the contract for the preservation, Demas Limited, was awarded the contract for the preservation of the Pointe-a-Pierre Refinery following its closure on the 30th of November 2018. Question 2. The cost of the preservation exercise from December 1st, 2018 to the 30th of June 2023 stood at that point in time, up to the 30th of June 2023, $34,628,161.73. So between December 1st, 2018 to the 30th of June 2023, the preservation cost based on the answer from the Freedom of Information stood at $34,628,161.73. So from the 30th of June to now, April, it is approximately, I think, 10 months. So we have July, August, September, etc. And if you took into account what Newman George said, at $500,000, that would add another 5 million TT dollars to approximately $40 million that it stood at to preserve, the cost to preserve this refinery since December 1st, 2018. Now that's a freedom of information. What is interesting, ladies and gentlemen, out there? This morning, somebody waited for me outside on the highway to give me some information about that cost of the refinery. And that is where I'm asking if this government really correctly gives us information when we file Freedom of Information. We're using the Freedom of Information Act, which is the law. This individual who waited for me before I attended this press conference gave me a document, a March 2024 document, Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited, a legal notice, and it is very confidential. I wouldn't show it up. But it talked about the preservation program in place to maintain the refinery. Okay? And it talks about the preservation program in place. And I'll give you some of the areas that they talked about preserving the refinery. It talked 1, 24-hour surveillance, operation and maintenance of personnel 21 individuals, security personnel 7. They talked about another exercise, nitrogen blanketing, all process and utility systems. It talked about equipment maintenance and monitoring program. It talked about refining assets remain intact on site. It talked about environmental monitoring. And you know what is the expenditure that they put monthly for the preservation of this refinery? And there's a figure here called preservation expenditure, $500,000 a month. US dollars a month. So I am asking the question here this morning, who do we believe? The Freedom of Information that was filed, that we got a response to, that says as at June 30th, 2023, the preservation cost was $34,628,161.73? Or do we believe what Newman George said at the JSC, that it was 500,000 TT dollars per month to preserve the refinery? Or do I believe this legal document, management presentation, March 2024, from Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited, that talked about preservation expenditure is 0.5 mm per month, which is $500,000 US dollars per month. So if you take 500,000 US dollars per month, and if this document is correct, that is literally, if you use a $7 factor, 7 5s are 35. That is literally 3.5 million TT dollars a month to preserve the Pointe-a-Pierre refinery. So we are asking questions for the Minister of Energy. Come and clarify, which is the correct figure? Is it 500,000 US dollars per month to preserve? Is it what Newman George said, 500,000 TT dollars per month? Or is it the Freedom of Information letter that we got on October 23rd that says up until the 30th of June 2023, the cost was $34,628,161.73 TT dollars. So we are in a dilemma because the maths is not mathsing. The maths is not mathsing. So ladies and gentlemen, these are the two areas I wanted to discuss this morning. And this government needs to come clean about that whole entire Pointe-a-Pierre refinery. We see there are eight bidders, potential bidders out there. That is what Mustaq Mohammed said in the JSC. There are 8 potential buyers. And it's interesting that one of the reasons he said, and I want to say, Mohammed said, I want to quote, this is Mustaq Mohammed at that JSC. There are 8 expressions of interest for the purchase. Either purchase, so someone has to put in a bid to purchase, someone has put in a bid to lease, and someone has put in a bid, here this one, restart of the refinery. That is critical. I always thought that the government was not interested in restarting the refinery. They said they're not in the refining business anymore. So if expressions of interest could have been put in for purchase, lease, or the restart of the refinery, that says to us and to this country, why would you put in a bid or a tender for evaluating to restart the refinery if some discussions was not held with you to restart the refinery? So I am asking this government, Minister Young, Prime Minister Rowley, to come clean and tell us what is the true story about that Pointe-a-Pierre refinery. And again, with those few words, I want to say, I really want to, before I bring up Dr. Tim, I really want to give kudos to UNC supporters yesterday, Saturday. And it is there in the headline. UNC supporters want the Couver Hospital dedicated and open for the children of Trinidad and Tobago. That is what the taxpayers of this country spent on between 2010 to 2015. It was for the children of Trinidad and Tobago. So I am happy, I'm elated that UNC supporters can come out on a Saturday and show support and demand the opening of the Couver Hospital and dedicate it for the young children of our country. And with those few words, I have a lot of, I've put a lot on the table this morning. I have a lot more to say, but I'll say it another time. And I would like to now ask my colleague, my esteemed former minister, my friend, my mentor, I would say, at certain points of time in my life, the Honorable Dr. Tim Gopeesingh.
Thank you very much for that warm introduction, Member of Parliament for Pointe-a-Pierre, Dr. David Lee, and Shadow Minister of Energy and Energy Industries. A very pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners and those on social media.
Yeah, well done,
And of course to the thousands of pregnant women in Trinidad and Tobago at this time. We know that thousands of you who are pregnant are looking on very cautiously to what is happening at the health institutions of Trinidad and Tobago, with particular reference to the Port-of-Spain General Hospital maternity unit and the neonatal intensive care unit at that hospital. We used to have about 28,000 births per year in the 1980s and 1990s and so on. And with periods of time that has fallen to about 19,000, 18,000, 17,000 deliveries per year and births per year. But now the birth rate seems to be falling, and from information provided by the Director of Women's Health, we would see that the birth rate is falling to about 14,000, 13,000 around at this time. So there are reasons for that, but we won't go into that this morning. So with those thousands of deliveries, about 20% of those babies that are born are admitted to neonatal units. And many of those are admitted to the intensive care of the neonatal units. The word neonatal means babies that are less than 28 days of life. A perinatal is within the first 7 days of life. And from the 20% of babies that are delivered who go to neonatal units, about 40% of those weigh less than 3,500 grams, and out of those, another 20% will weigh less than 1,500 grams, which is about 3.5 pounds. Now, there are different causative factors in these pregnancies that will result in preterm deliveries. And preterm means delivery of a baby before 37 weeks of gestation, before 37 weeks of pregnancy. I'm speaking to you on this issue because I've been a doctor for about 50 years now. In fact, our class is now celebrating our 50 years anniversary in Jamaica later on next month. And of course, a gynecologist for 44 years, and who would have worked through more than 30 years in the public health sector, and many, many years as a university lecturer, professor, etc., and trained thousands of students, and of course, helped to train some of the gynecologists who came back from the Royal College as well. So it gives me a certain degree of apprehension and what I would call trepidation in terms of what I have been reading and coming to grips with over the last 1 or 2 weeks, having myself delivered thousands and thousands of babies. And every child, every baby that is born from every mother deserves a place in life and deserves a life, because that baby, whether premature or not, can reach the highest level in their lifetime. Could be a prime minister, a president, a nuclear scientist, or artificial intelligence expert, which is coming around now. So every child must be given the opportunity with the utmost care and attention after delivery, or even before delivery, for them to survive. And over the last few days, I want to indicate that were it not for one of the media houses, the issue of these 11 babies dying at Port-au-Prince General Hospital Neonatal Intensive Care Unit would not have surfaced if not for one of the media houses which exposed the issue. Now, 11 babies dying with 2 mothers having twin pregnancies, and that is excruciatingly painful for these 2 mothers who have lost their twin babies in the neonatal intensive care unit. So the newspapers over the weekend, Saturday, yesterday, they express, in the face of 11 baby deaths, Kamala calls on the Prime Minister to have a conscience and show humanity. And this is a noble call by the leader of the opposition, the former Prime Minister, the distinguished former Prime Minister, internationally distinguished and brilliant Prime Minister, to open the Couver Children's Hospital. That was on Saturday, the Express. Then the Guardian of Saturday medical negligence lawsuit against Port-of-Spain General Hospital Neonatal Intensive Care Unit. Nurses' baby hopes dashed. Recounts tragic loss of newborn on April 9th. Says it was a last chance at motherhood. Accuses hospital of cover-up. And Newsday, Saturday, that's yesterday, Nursing Association, a doc sent on leave, a scapegoat. And so all Saturday newspapers, the daily newspapers, headline stories related to these infants and neonates who passed unfortunately at the intensive care unit neonatology ward. And today, this morning, the Sunday Express, another pre-action letter, NWRHA defends doctors. And inside, there is the editorial, opening Couver Hospital, not the end all. But I will deal with that pretty shortly. And the Guardian, Tobago mom wants answers. Says she lost 2 babies 1 year apart at Port-of-Spain Neonatal Intensive Care Unit. Accuses hospital of cover-up and wants PAHO probe extended to other public hospitals. That's the Guardian. And then the Newsday, NWRHA says no collapse of the health sector, which is laughable. Now, so let me first of all go on to speak about the editorial of the Sunday Express, and which tries to indicate that the call, it is all well and good for the opposition leader, Mrs. Bissessa, to call for the Couver Children's Hospital to be open, but that won't solve the core problem in the country's public health sector. And they go on to quote that existing hospitals are significantly under-resourced in terms of staff, equipment, and medical supplies. And that is one of the crux of the healthcare system in Trinidad and Tobago and the worsening health sector, because it is recognized that existing hospitals are significantly under-resourced, meaning the 1,500 nurses which are short within the hospital system and hundreds of doctors awaiting jobs where these doctors can be placed, and the paramedical professionals are not employed to help the healthcare system. But we want to re-emphasize what the editorial is saying today on the Sunday Express. Even so, since the Couver Hospital cost $1.5 billion to build and equip, the Keith Rowley administration should stop balking at opening the institution. In his budget speech in 2017, Finance Minister Colm Imbert promised that the renamed Couver Medical and Multi-Training Facility would be operational the following year. That's in 2017. Prime Minister said that they should be open. 6 years later, no good reasons have been given by its continued closure. So it's almost 9 years now that this Couver Hospital, with 80 beds in one tower, 40 for women and 40 in pediatrics, and the other tower with 150 beds for adults, with millions of dollars in equipment, MRI, CT scans, neonatal intensive care units, operating theaters, and wards galore, have not been opened. Kevin, I wonder whether you would be kind enough to show the Women's Hospital, the Couver Children's Hospital, which we had named the Children's Hospital because it was designed to be a children's hospital. And within they come into the office, they named it the Couver Medical and Multi-Training Institution.
The health of a nation can only be as strong as the health of its citizens. It is with this resolve that the Honorable Mrs. Kamla Prasad Bissessa, MP, SC, Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, made it her personal mission to ensure that life-saving surgeries were made accessible to the country's most vulnerable citizens, our children. UDECOT continues to build on their success and experience gained from their first completed hospital project, the ultra-state-of-the-art San Fernando Teaching Hospital. The new Couver Children's Hospital will offer critical medical care to both children and adults, with a 3-story bed tower dedicated to pediatrics and women's care containing 80 beds, and a second 3-story bed tower dedicated to adult patients containing 150 beds.
This is the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit. This is where, at the Couver Children's Hospital, we will offer care for our nation's most vulnerable. What you see here is a neonatal incubator. This offers a cocoon-like environment with optimal thermoregulation and protection from external factors. At the Couver Children's Hospital, we have 2 dedicated nursery areas with a centrally located nurse station for optimal monitoring and supervision. Also unique to the hospital are these viewing windows behind me. This is where the relatives of the infant can meet them for the first time.
This hospital will also be one to attract medical tourism. Yes, it will service our citizens here, but it will also be a light shining throughout the CARICOM, and that was what this dream that others spoke about, that is what it was about. That this is a project that will endure for generations to come, and this hospital will be servicing the children and adults of Trinidad and Tobago.
The ultra-modern Couver Children's Hospital now ranks as the newest beacon in medical advancement and innovation in Trinidad and Tobago, as we seek to vastly improve the delivery of first-class health care to our citizens, with special emphasis on our children. And now better positions Trinidad and Tobago as the region's first choice as a premier medical tourism destination.
So thank you very much for showing the Couver Children's Hospital, which was constructed in 2015 and ready for opening. 9 years later now, nearly 9 years, that hospital remains closed. And in fact, the editorial went on to say, today express, this naturally lends evidence to the opposition leaders' claims of vindictiveness. At the very least, public interest does not seem to even figure in the government's continued reluctance to use the hospital. Why has the government refused to use a hospital which has almost 230 beds with state-of-the-art facilities? I want to re-emphasize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition statement. It is out of pure hate and malice and spite and vindictiveness. Anything that the United National Congress government, the People's Partnership government did between 2010 and 2015, the Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, and his team seem to be averse in continuation of any of their policies and programs that we had established and introduced and that were very, very successful. They seem to, so it's out of spite and of course, we wouldn't even go to the area of where they left Sempe schools under construction and out of spite and malice and vindictiveness as well. And those schools had been dehumanized for the children. The editorial says, after all, a centrally located healthcare institution that is so easily accessible from south and north will help save more lives. And that is what this institution was constructed for, to be a buffer from the Eric Williams Medical Science Complex and the San Fernando General Hospital, to be able to take care of citizens at a high level of sophistication of healthcare. unlike what exists now, healthcare institutions should be managed by qualified hospital administrations, which is a specialized area, and doctors and nurses with managerial authority, since they are the ones who can best identify patients' needs. So the editorial of today's Sunday Express focuses on some of the major issues that confronts the health sector. Why we have called for the Prime Minister to fire Minister Dayal-Singh. Minister Dayal-Singh, the facts are, has been a failed pharmacist twice, not once but twice. And I believe that he didn't even pass any exams. How can you give someone like that to run a health sector where lives are involved and are critical for nearly 9 years, when the health sector has been worsening from day to day and there have been no signs of improvement in the health sector? And this latest fiasco of these children dying is just one of the continuing evidence of the incompetence of this government, of this Minister of Health, to run the health sector. Then the regional health authority boards are appointed by the government and by cabinet and by the minister. And these regional health authority boards do not have the managerial capacity and the competence to manage a healthcare system. And this is why all the regional health authorities are failing. When you can put, and even the CEOs, when you put a carnival man who puts up props and stages at carnival events to be the chief executive officer of the Central Regional Health Authority, what a shame and disgrace. How can you expect good performance in a health sector when these are the people running it? These regional health authority board members are not qualified and suitable for management and administration of the health sector. And this is where Minister Dayal-Singh must vacate his seat. He must resign or must be removed, because he is the one who is responsible for appointing these regional health authority boards. And I echo the sentiments and the statements of the Honorable Leader of the Opposition when she called for the firing of Minister Dayal-Singh, the firing of the Regional Health Authority, the NWRHA board, and the Chief Executive Officer. So I will speak about that in a little more detail and go on straight now. And one of the headlines on the Saturday Express, deaths of babies at Port-au-Prince General Hospital, Kamla calls for immediate opening of Children's Hospital and slams government for malice and spite. Written by Anna Ramdas. The opposition leader Kamla Prasad Bisesa has called for the immediate opening of the Couver Children's Hospital, which is fully equipped and can address this health crisis in this nation. And she re-emphasizes, she said, had Rowley opened the hospital to serve the purpose for which it was built, many lives would have been saved. That is indisputable, because the overflow from the Central Regional Health Authority at Eric Williams and the overflow from San Fernando Hospital would allow some of these babies to have been looked at Couver Pediatric Hospital, and there would not have been the overcrowding at Port-au-Prince Hospital as well. She said if Rowley has a grain of humanity and conscience within him, he would immediately open the hospital. And yesterday, as my colleague Dr. David Lee said just a while ago, that there was a protest for the reopening of the Couver Hospital. We anchor the sentiments of those protesters, and we stand in solidarity with those protesters in calling for Dr. Rowley to open the Couver Hospital now. Too many people are losing their lives across the country when you have an institution with 230 beds, 40 pediatrics, 40 women, and 150 adults lying idly for nearly 9 years, with equipment that have probably lost their guarantees and millions of dollars of those equipment. And in fact, the leader of the opposition went on to state the list of Couver Children's Hospital equipment provided by her government of between 2010 and 2015. Neonatal intensive care unit, 12 dedicated incubators, dedicated vital signs monitors, blood pressure monitors, neonatal incubators equipment, fully equipped trolleys, portable analyzers, nursery area, 2 dedicated nursery areas, 24 infant bassinets. Each bassinet is self-contained, central nurses station, large viewing station, dedicated family area, and so on. And the Couver Hospital that you saw just a while ago contains all these things for a neonatal intensive care unit, and they have been lying idly while other institutions do not have these equipment. So why not open it? Why not open it? Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar said that the PNM government created false excuses to prevent the opening of the hospital, including that there were insufficient doctors. When, at 2016, when we were asking why haven't you opened the Couver Hospital, Minister Dayal Singh, the Minister of Death, the lives of 4,400 COVID patients are on his hands and on the hands of the 4 advisors to him who ill-advised him. And when we were saying that patients were dying in the intensive care unit, almost 100%, nobody took us on. And the Simongal report showed that 99% of the patients who went to the intensive care unit died as a result of inefficient management, where there were not enough doctors to nurses, there were junior doctors, there were not doctors to patients, there were 1 nurse to probably 5 or 6 intensive care unit patients. So that is why we say the Minister of Health, now Minister Dayal Singh, is the Minister of Death. And we make no bones about it, and he should resign himself or be fired by Prime Minister Rowley. Or the population wants to fire Prime Minister Rowley and his government. The entire government must go. Just health and education are 2 cornerstone and fundamental pillars of any civilized society. And when these go bad, it is the constitutional right of any government to provide health and education in an equitable and a sustainable manner with proper care and attention. That is the constitutional right of every citizen to receive that. And a government ought to be doing those things. If a government fails to do so, the government should be removed. And the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So when Mrs. Bissessar speaks on behalf of the mothers who have lost their babies, she's speaking out of her heart and her love and affection for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And she is the alternate Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, and leads the alternate government. And she speaks on behalf of those who have no voice, the voiceless, the dispossessed. So when she speaks about that, it is not politicization. She has a moral responsibility and a full responsibility to speak on behalf of the citizens who are dispossessed, who do not have a voice, and who cannot be heard. And she is the voice who speaks on behalf of those citizens. And that is the brilliance of the former Prime Minister, Mrs. Kamala Prasad-Bissessar. So no one could say it's any politicization of this issue. Politics is about for the people, by the people, and of the people. So the people are represented by politicians. And if she is the lead of the alternate government, she ought to speak, which she has done. And she ought to be complimented and congratulated for speaking out so forcefully and smartly on the issues that of particularly this fiasco at the neonatal intensive care unit. So when we asked them why they're not opening, they said they don't have enough doctors. And when there were 300 to 400 young doctors waiting for employment, Minister Dayal Singh told a lie. He lied to the country. And when he was further asked why He said that they want to go and work in remote areas. Up to today, 300 to 400 young doctors are still unemployed. Then when they were pressed further, they said they're waiting on a Welsh report. They promised the people to come into government to run a health sector, but they're waiting on a Welsh report. That Welsh report took 2 years. I know Winston Welsh, he's my colleague. He had to bring in the guy from Howard University who has some difficulties now, and they took 2 years to bring a report. So 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, the report comes. The report says two things. Get a partner to help run the Couver unit, the Couver hospital, and of course bring in a medical school. Well, 8 years later, nearly 9 years later, nobody wants to partner with this government to run the Couver pediatric hospital. And no offshore medical school has come to Trinidad or wants to come to Trinidad. We're hearing things now about the University of the West Indies talking about bringing an offshore medical school. 9 years later, Barbados next door has 5 offshore medical schools, and people are going for accreditation. Some of my colleagues are going across there to help to accredit some of the institutions, the offshore medical school there, some of my professorial colleagues. So why is it that Trinidad? So this government shows its incompetence and its incapacity to govern and to do anything that is in the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And the Honorable Leader of the Opposition went on to give a detailed account of what exists at the Couver Hospital. So from this podium, with 50 years experience in medicine, 44 years as a gynecologist, who have done thousands of operative procedures and deliveries, almost 15 to 20,000 deliveries. I stand today, I believe I'm probably one of the most senior doctors around in the country at this time, having been there as a doctor for 50 years. To compliment the Honorable Leader of the Opposition and to congratulate her on the constant calls for the reopening of this Couver Hospital. It cannot be laid to waste. And I re-emphasize a call for Minister Diyal Singh to vacate as Minister of Health. It is not like sitting page behind a bar. It is running the health of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and no amount of things that you come with on a daily basis in Parliament can negate your incompetence and your inability. And Prime Minister Rowley, you should be held responsible for allowing the continuation of the deterioration in this health sector. Day by day it worsens, and many citizens are losing their lives all the time. And preventable deaths, where the accident and emergencies are overcrowded, patients are on their trolleys and wheelchairs and falling off the trolleys and so on and dying in emergency departments, waiting for days to be warded, waiting for medication and investigations to be done for days, patients having to wait for 2 years for clinic appointments, 2 to 3 years for emergency surgical procedures. What is happening in this country? Then you have the vacancy of 1,500 nurses, 300 to 400 doctors needed to be employed. And so there's crumbling. This country has 10 hospitals, major hospitals, 9 district health facilities, and 105 health centers. Citizens of this country ought not to be suffering and dying needlessly in the healthcare system. It is because of mismanagement and hate and spite and vindictiveness that continue to cause the loss of lives in this country. And the COVID-19, 4,400 deaths, is enough example of what has been happening. And so the honorable political leader said that when patients go in there in the hospital, expect to come out well cured and be physically better. They come out as corpses and end up in the mortuaries of the major hospitals. And so I just want to speak a bit about the Nursing Association head, what he had to say on this matter about these babies. He said the NWRHA has questions to answer about staffing issues at the NICU and their possible contribution to the babies' deaths. The RHA needs to say how many babies were admitted between April 4th and 9th, what is the bed capacity of the unit, if all the beds were occupied, and how many nurses they had rostered to the unit. International standards give protocols as to how many neonatologists there should be in a country. I believe we probably might have only 5 or 6 neonatologists in the country. So what has the government been doing about training more neonatologist specialists? Where has the money been going? $56 billion have been spent over the last 8 years. Can we not train? How many neonatologists, neonatology specialist nurses do you have in the institution? What is the neonatologist to neonate ratio? What is the specialist nurses to neonate ratio? These are answers that the government has to give. Stewart also asked whether all the nursing assigned to NICU had undergone the 18-month training program required to become a NICU specialist nurses. This government, Dr. Rowley's government, closed down the nurses training center in Tonapuna when there were over 300 to 400 nurses trained per year at that center. And what have they done about the nurses training school at the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex, where specialist nurses were being trained over the number of years? We need specialist nurses for cardiac care, for renal dialysis, for intensive care. We need specialist nurses for emergency medicine. And yet there's the absence of training in this country for all these specialist nursing personnel. So we have nurses who are state-registered nurses doing the work of what specialist nurses ought to be doing. So this is what the president of the Nursing Association asked. They need to say how many of them are specialist nurses. It is highly unlikely because no area, barring none, in the healthcare sector do we currently have all areas occupied with specialist nurses. So what you end up happening is a number of the registered nurses but not specialized in any particular field. Stewart said the Port-au-Prince General Hospital Medical Director, Hoop Jones' report, should also have questions to answer in this scenario. He went on to say, this doctor who was released, he's there to advise the medical chief of staff and the other parties within the hospital. He cannot change the environment. He cannot change the human resource capacity. He cannot do any of those things. He has to propose and advise how to implement, but he cannot mandate these things being done. So, in other words, he's being used as a scapegoat. And he goes on to say, the president of the Nursing Association asked, what is the current nurse-to-patient ratio and so on? Can you say what the nurse-to-patient ratio between April 4th and 9th? All the nurses assigned to NICU specialists in neonatal care. So he has spoken strongly and ends by saying he stressed that senior management at the hospital should be held responsible for their deaths. So who are the senior management? The senior management, basically the chief executive officer, chief medical officer, and of course the boards, the regional health authority boards. So, listening audience and viewers, it's very sad that this situation had to come to the forefront. And we await information from the regional health authority who should be fired as to what is going to happen or what is now happening at the neonatology unit of the Port-au-Prince General Hospital. We want to know whether they are following the infection protection policy manual, whether they are using the neonatal policy manual, how to prevent sepsis, the control of sepsis, surveillance, antimicrobial infection, using the WHO formula and recommendation, whether they are using any identification of adverse events, reporting lines of timely caring manner. Is there a trend? What is contributing to this trend? And in fact, infection control nurses. The protocol obviously done by senior personnel with competence and capacity in every one of these neonatal intensive care units have within them all the protocols for management of babies when they come to the intensive care unit. So it says, it shows you once you detect and you isolate and you clean, there must be a vigil. As soon as the baby gets sick, more isolation. There must be cleaning with trained people to recognize neonatal infection. Various seminars and training and management and cleaning must be done on a routine basis. Infection control nurse may not be limited to doing that alone. So the cleaning staff must be trained. Medical care of the newborn must be done with swabs and culture and sensitivity, isolate, antiseptic solutions, and so on. Gowns, masks, and washing up, and so on a regular basis. So it is the Ministry of Health responsibility. It is the minister's responsibility. It is the board of the Regional Health Authority responsibility. It's the chief executive officer of these hospitals' responsibility. So they all must be held accountable, and we call for their dismissals of these. We call for the urgent dismissal of the Minister of Death, Minister Dayal Singh. We call for his immediate removal. And Prime Minister, we cannot wait for the PAHO investigating team, who will be coming in at the end of the month and who will take a month or two again to present a report. And then that report will be done just the same way that the report of the Simongal report has been done almost 3 years now, and laying in a waste paper basket with no implementation. We believe that the same fate will come to this PAHO report that will be done sometime whenever it is done. So we want to tell the pregnant mothers now to be strong, be focused on your antenatal care, visit your health centers and your district health facilities, ensure that those health facilities have trained staff and personnel, and you must be referred to the major institutions for any immediate problem. Take your pregnancy in hand. We call on the government to ensure that each one of our institutions is fully equipped with professional nursing and medical and paraprofessional staff, equipped with surgical supplies, medical supplies, and equipped for training and continuous training of these personnel. We cannot continue to lose lives the way that we are losing lives. The death rate in Trinidad and Tobago is almost 12,000 annually. 6,000 men, 6,000 women. About 2,000 die from heart disease and cardiac disease. 1,000 die from hypertension. 1,000 die from complications of diabetes, and so on. And about another 1,200 die from cancer. So we know these facts, but yet still the government fails to put in systems in place for dealing with the chronic non-communicable diseases of diabetes, hypertension, and cancer, which will reduce the death rate in Trinidad and Tobago by a significant extent. People are dying of complications as a result of uncared diabetes, hypertension, and of course, cancer. So we need to reduce that. When we compare Trinidad and Tobago to the rest of the world, developed countries, The life expectancy in Trinidad and Tobago for men is 69. When you're born, the life expectancy is 69 and 72 for women. In developed countries, the life expectancy is 79 for men and 82 for women. When are we going to reach there? With this government in existence now, we will never reach there. In fact, the life expectancy is decreasing from this government. So I say, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, listen to the opposition, the voice of the opposition. Listen to the speakers from the platforms of the UNC. It's time to change your government, and we call for an early election now to rid this country of this incompetent government of Prime Minister Rowley. Time for all of them to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tim Gopeesingh. You will have heard. Thank you for your presentation this morning. We have media. I don't know if there are any questions that the media would like to ask based on what they would have heard this morning from either myself or Dr. Tim.
Mr. Lee, there is Couver from CNC3. You mentioned receiving some documents in a very interesting way. How is the population supposed to believe in the authenticity of the document that you would have read from, especially because you mentioned this individual waiting for you on the highway to give it to you?
Well, let me put it this way. The documents that I have in my possession are very valid. It is with the government or the Minister of Energy to come and refute it. You would have heard time and time again, I have gotten documents in my mailbox of people who want to stay anonymous, but they have produced documents to me. At short notice, I was asked to be in this press conference, and when I guess when the advertisement went out, this individual saw it, felt it was important to come and give me a document to refute what was said in that JSC by Newman George of the amount of 500,000 TT dollars, which he said per month to preserve the refinery. And the document that I have says 500,000 US dollars per month to preserve the refinery. That was posed, that same question was posed to Newman George in the GSC, and they asked him to clarify if it was TT dollars or US dollars that he was talking about, and he said TT dollars, and the document I have says US dollars. So I have the document. It is a confidential document from Trinidad Petroleum Holding, and we do from time to time get confidential documents because the people of Trinidad and Tobago, they are fed up with this government, and they feel that they're supposed to, because they're supposed to give information so that it could come out in the public domain for the betterment of this country.
Hungary's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade in our Sunday Business Guardian expressed a desire to invest in the development of the 90-kilometer pipeline between both Trinidad and Venezuela to facilitate this drug and gas deal. Now, this conversation happened even after there was this announcement about sanctions being reimposed against Venezuela. What is the opposition's thoughts on that, seeing as there seems to be positive conversation still around the drug and gas deal being actualized? Because you are expressing concern as of right now that based on the sanctions, the deal could flop.
All right. Let me first state that I read that article this morning before coming here. It was in the papers. And I'm not surprised by what the gentleman has said. He's based in Trinidad and Tobago. He loves Trinidad and Tobago. He loves the warm climate. So that the drug and gas deal, the opposition is, let me put it on squarely, and I've said this many, many times before. The opposition is not against getting gas for this country. But when this government has placed all their eggs, as they say, in that drug and gas deal, to the detriment of not doing the proper incentivization within our own borders to continue aggressively developing our oil and gas sector within our own borders, You know, that is the concern the opposition has. So and that has always been our concern. And even Prime Minister Rowley understands the sensitivity of this natural gas, this gas deal with the Venezuelan government. He knows it is very sensitive and is really like walking on eggshells. So at any given time, it can be delayed for several years. And what do we do as a country that is dependent on our gas and oil sector for the kind of revenues to enjoy the standard of living that we have enjoyed for many, many years? And that is the problem we as an opposition have with the policy that is being dictated by this government.
All right, Dr. Gopeesingh, I have to ask you, with the PAHO members sending, well, PAHO has sent 3 people, will be sending 3 people to come before the end of this month to start this investigation. Do you have any confidence that any report born out of this investigation would bear fruit and that the relevant people would be held accountable for these babies' deaths in Pointe-a-Pierre?
I have confidence in this international organization, PAHO, Pan-American Health Organization, and I'm certain that they would send very competent personnel to do this investigation, knowing the issues at hand in terms of cross-infections, neonatologists, staffing, etc. And I hope they will probably select some of the best. And whatever report they come up with, we will be able to analyze it. And it's a matter, we have confidence that they will produce something. But we don't have confidence that the government will use the recommendations of this report and the findings to better the care in these neonatal intensive care units. We have one in Port-au-Spain, we have one at Eric Williams, we have one at San Fernando Hospital, I believe Sangre Grande Hospital may have one as well. But we need have local personnel as well who can do the investigation in the meantime, and because they are very skilled people, as we had in the Sibongal report. We had 4 or 5 professionals in Trinidad who did the report, made 21 recommendations, none of which has been implemented as yet. So we are saying, and the Honorable Leader of the Opposition said so on Friday, that she has no confidence that the report, the findings of the report, will be dealt with by this government. It's a basically incompetent government. Prime Minister Rowley is fumbling and he is tilting over. He doesn't know where he's going. He's on holidays all the time. I know Prime Minister Rowley for more than 50 years, and I expected better of him to be able to run this country, and he has not done so, and I said it is shameful.
Based on the information we have in the public domain about these babies and the rising number of deaths and the data that we have in our possession as of right now, as a person who has worked in this field, is it an alarming figure? Is it something that, because you did have a message for pregnant women to continue to go into healthcare facilities, but some women have expressed concern. They are worried, they are afraid.
Understandably so.
So when you tell them that, but then you have this situation happening, and then the Prime Minister is saying that the healthcare system has not collapsed, what is your thoughts on that?
But first of all, I differ from him. The healthcare system has collapsed. It has started to collapse under the first year of his administration, and it is worse now 8 to 9 years later. In terms of, we expect the regional health authorities and the hospital people to indicate what they have done, what measures they have implemented, so that they can allay the anxiety of pregnant women who are close to delivery, so that if the babies happen to have to go in the intensive care unit, that those babies will be taken care of. But we're not hearing anything about that from the regional health authority, from the administration, nor the Minister of Health. When the Minister of Health was asked about what is happening there, he said to go and ask the NWRHA. And NWRHA has only now started to make some statements about it. It's too little, too late. They sat on themselves and allowed this thing to escalate. So I'm saying to all pregnant mothers, be advised properly. Whatever issues you may have, address some of these with your competent gynecologists and obstetricians in the maternity unit, in the antenatal clinics, and get some answers to to your questions, and understandably, they will be very concerned. I share and I empathize with them, and I wish them success in their deliveries. Now, the Prime Minister Rowley asked for recommendations in terms of how we manage this thing. The recommendations are very easy. These babies, most of these babies who go to the neonatology unit are preterm babies. Preterm babies are before 37 weeks of gestation. And what causes preterm deliveries? And there are many factors. The issues of multiple pregnancy and infections and mothers who have been traumatized and so on. Patients who have had a history of preterm delivery before, who are senior age, who have social problems as well, they are identifiable. Educate the population, the pregnant population, on the problems that exist that may cause them to have a preterm delivery, and advise them and provide the facilities where they can go and get all the information, seek the antenatal clinic visits properly on a regular basis so that they prevent the preterm delivery. So we can give a discourse on that. And the Minister of Health, unfortunately, doesn't have a clue about those things. So this is why the country is fumbling. Incompetent Minister of Health who doesn't know about health, regional health authority boards who don't know about health, and the CEOs who are carnival people who are running the healthcare system. Do we expect the healthcare system to do well? So obviously, things have to change and change fast.
What message do you have for pregnant women in terms of advocating for themselves? Because sometimes you go into our medical facilities, a doctor comes, they see you, they administer medicine, they don't tell you what the medicine is. Things like that are reported often. What message do you have for pregnant women now to ensure that they demand the health care that they need and that their babies also get the health care that they also need?
Well, most hospitals have antenatal clinics, and there are seminars being done within these clinics for the pregnant patients. When I left Mount Hope in 2007, the Women's Hospital, those were in train. I don't know what has happened since then, but these are where they can ask their questions and get their answers heard. And amongst themselves in the clinic, they will speak amongst themselves as well. But this is where a charter from the institution, from each institution, each RHA, a patient rights charter should be established and should be available for all personnel using the institutions. So a charter of rights is there for it to be used. And then, of course, you have to have in the hospital systems personnel who will be working with patients on a regular basis, answering their questions, alleviating their fears.
Thank you. That's it? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Tim. Thank you for those questions. Before I end, on behalf of myself and my esteemed colleague joining me this morning, Dr. Tim, the Honorable Dr. Tim Gopeesingh, both of us would like to, and the staff that is present here this morning, and I'm sure the media would like to take this opportunity to wish our political leader, opposition leader, Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa, happy birthday. Her birthday will be celebrated tomorrow. And I just want to remind even the media that is here, tomorrow we'll be having our Monday night cottage meeting in the constituency of Princess Tong, hosted by MP Barry Padarat. It will be held at the Williamsville Secondary School at 7 p.m. Williamsville Secondary School in the constituency of Princess Tong. So I ask you all, our political leader is working even on her birthday. She'll be celebrating her birthday, working at our meeting. So she understands the importance of continuing the work and bringing the information to the people even on her birthday. So we take this opportunity to wish her well before tomorrow. Happy birthday,
leader, and we wish you continued great
I want to thank the listening audience, the viewers out there, for tuning in this morning to our Sunday morning presser on behalf of the opposition. So I thank you and have a blessed day.